Hello, everyone. We're here with Quinn, who's going to tell us a little bit about music. Um, well, Quinn, this is a most complex endeavor, I would say, to kind of cram a piece with ideas like this, and ideas that are about themselves and music. And there, you mentioned that there's internal meaning and external meaning and references to other artworks, etc. So just give us a brief synopsis of what you aimed to do in writing this piece.
Sure. Yeah, and thanks, Alex and Esprit for having me here and for resharing the music. It was a wonderful opportunity at first to write for the ensemble, and this is just a bonus after. So thank you so much
Not at all.
for the opportunity. Yeah. So the piece was kind of questioning the value of contemporary music. It's something I've been thinking about a lot in terms of the function of composers today, the function of performers, of ensembles, of larger organizations and granting bodies. Like, what is our purpose here, especially with contemporary music, where it often feels like, all of these things are happening in the world that we need to be addressing, and sometimes we're just sitting there, with our pad and paper, pad of paper and pencil, and just writing our little ideas down, and sometimes I have the feeling that it's not meaningful enough, or it's not achieving enough, and maybe that's a bad thing for a composer to say or something. But I think it's important questions we should be asking is how do our goals and our how does our job as a composer, as musicians, how does that meet the needs of the world, and where's that intersection, and how can we live at that intersection and do things that are good for the world, and that are looking outside of the music. So that's something I was really thinking about when writing this piece, and especially because I had a kind of larger chamber ensemble, the chamber orchestra of Esprit that I was working with for this piece. I kind of had this opportunity to use more instruments, to have this larger scale work, but still the same questions were coming up about, what is the function? So I thought I'd embed those questions within the piece and have the piece comment on itself and ask those questions to the audience. And also the text is kind of structured as a conversation in the piece. It's like me and a colleague of mine are kind of having this conversation about the values of contemporary music, and the piece looks at itself. It says, what is this piece for? What is this individual musical line that you're hearing? What is that achieving? And it also asks, what is the relation of this piece to other pieces? How is the audience responding to the things that they're hearing? The piece kind of talks about all of those different things. And you're right that it was a lot of things to try to, put in a single piece. It was, felt a little bit like the kitchen sink at times, but it's something that that I think gives the piece energy and gives it its unique character is the fact that it asks those questions.
Yeah. And you say at one point in your notes that music does not come from music, that it comes from life experience. Can you explain that a bit? I mean, music does come from music in a sense that it follows or not a tradition. Or it either accepts and follows a tradition, or rejects it and creates something as a reaction. But the idea that I sense that you're getting at the idea that life experiences other than musical ones affect the music.
Yes, exactly. And you're totally right that you can think of this question in different ways. Do we continue from tradition or break tradition? Coming from that line trajectory of music. But yes, I meant it more in this case, in terms of when we're writing music, as composers going through composition school, we learn a lot of techniques. It's okay, you can, here's how to work with counterpoint. This is retrograde, and this is, okay, you can invert the melody, you can reharmonize it, you can do all these different things. And it graduating from composition school, you might think, oh, music does come from music. In order to write music, you need to know about all of these little elements, and you need to put them together, and how do you orchestrate, and what colors go together well, and what, all of these, musical kind of starting places. But that's not really where music comes from. Of course, music comes from our lives, comes from the things we've experienced and that we're trying to express. And all of us have different reasons for writing. Maybe we're telling a story, maybe we're, raising different voices. We're doing all kind of different things with the music. But I think for all of us, even if the piece is called Symphony Number 5 in, F minor or whatever, it's still not about music. It's still about something else. I think music is always about something else. It's always about, what we've experienced. It's a reflection of, of the world in our own eyes as creators. And for performers also interpreting the music, it's about their lives too. It's about all of our lives. So that's the title kind of pokes fun at that, because it's not music about music, but the piece kind of is also music about music because it discusses music.
Yeah, well, also, of course, this piece reflects an experience in the world that you have had as it relates to contemporary music, so to speak. So it's kind of internalized within the musical life and musical world in a sense, even though you're talking about relating to audiences, etc. But can you give an example of some other music of yours that is not so related within the musical world, reflecting on music, etc., but responds to life experiences outside? Like maybe you went on a canoe trip or something. I don't, I mean, like that's a very simple idea, but
Yes.
there might be more complex ones. So when you were doing a piece, say that's like more, for lack of a better word, pure music or non-explanatory, like this piece is delving with a lot of philosophical issues, etc. But if you're just doing music without these words, and I mean, this is very reliant on text in a lot of, I mean, there's instrumental sound, of course, but the text is so important.
It's important. Yep.
But if you're just doing music, so to speak, related to life experience, what other pieces of yours exemplify this idea, or how did you exemplify it?
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff I've been doing in the last 4 or 5 years does use text and or theatricality. So I started a sort of experimental music theater company called Den of Shadows about 3 years ago, and we put on pieces that are kind of interdisciplinary, and I've written a number of times for that group. And yeah, so a lot of what I do does include musicians moving, extending motions slower if they're, bowing or using physical gestures. I do use a good amount of voiceover these days, which is inspired largely by a number of dance works I've seen, contemporary dance works that use voiceover very effectively, and often self-reflective voiceover. So a lot of what I do recently, the last few years does use text and does use other, let's say extra musical elements. But I certainly do work that doesn't. I think it's less of kind of explaining an experience I've had, like say a canoe trip or, going and taking a walk outside or something. It's less of, of Vivaldi, Four Seasons kind of, okay, this violin is representing this bird or something, or this lightning or something. It's less of that, and it's more kind of ideas I have. I deal a lot with kind of mythology and kind of created mythologies, kind of I think a lot about rebirth and this cycle of life and death, kind of ideas like that, and philosophical or spiritual concepts often make their way into my work. It's less about a specific experience that I'm trying to emulate in a musical way.
Yeah, so they're non-musical life experiences or spiritual experiences that your music becomes imbued with, maybe not in a direct or literal way, but just your being absorbs these things, and these things transfer through your being into what you create. Is that
perhaps that's too abstract for me to say that, but that's true. Yes, if I can give that answer.
That's different from the canoe trip, so to speak. The paddle hits the water, and
and both are very valid, and I was listening to your interview with Eugene recently, who also wrote a piece on the same show as this one, and he was talking about imagery and visual imagery, when composing, and I tend not to think as much maybe visually, but more kind of thoughts and things, though both are very powerful, ways to write.
So you seem to use technology in a lot of your pieces as well. What are the challenges there? I mean, are you seeing this as the permanent direction of music as we go forward, that this is just going to be more and more ingrained in musical creation as we go forward?
I think so, for sure. I can't see another way, really. Yeah, I think technology is a big part of it. And personally, I also think that the kind of theatricality or using extra musical elements, let's call them, or non-musical elements, I think that's also a part of music that's becoming more important. I see a lot of shows, or well, I don't see any shows now, but back when shows were happening, you'd see a lot of contemporary ensembles, or especially smaller groups that are, more mobile, able to using theater or using some, circus elements in their shows, or having visual art at the same time, or having the musicians, at least even just, spatializing the sound differently. Okay, this performer is going to sing something here, then they're going to walk there and sing a different thing. So I think those elements are becoming more important. And different reasons. I think a lot of the media we consume these days, thinking about contemporary music, a lot of the media we consume is coming through speakers, right? So we're used to the sound of recorded music and amplified instruments and electronics. And we're very used to that sound when we watch television, when we, movies, and when we see rock concerts or other types of shows. We're always having that kind of sound. And in contemporary music, or contemporary music coming from classical music, let's say, coming from that tradition, is more acoustic sound traditionally, and is becoming much more, electric and electronic for the last 70 or 80 years or whatever, since those early experiments. So I definitely think it's an undeniable direction that music is going in, and I'm trying to go along on that direction. But acoustic instruments are also very valuable, and they still have a lot to say. And I think there's great blends that we can get, and different sonic sort of palettes we can explore using electronics in combination with acoustic instruments.
Yeah. Well, particularly in the time of this pandemic, where everybody is doing Zoom and internet dissemination, it seems that that kind of kicks the art more in that direction, just because it's a necessity now, but it's probably going to have a lasting impact or imprint.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about how your work relates to other works involving text, works from the past, such as
Sure.
Soldat, and you've mentioned some of those other pieces.
Absolutely. So there are a number, you could even call it a tradition of orchestral music or ensemble music with narration, including, of course, the Soir Soldat, Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra, which is a very different work. Of course, it has a different function, but that's one. There's some great. There's a great Rosowski piece called Coming Together. I was very inspired by a David Lang piece called Are You Experienced, which even actually more than these other ones. In this piece, I'm not sure if you know it. It's a chamber work, and the concept is David Lang comes on at the beginning and he says, I'm sitting there in the audience, or you're sitting there in the audience, and something hits you on the head. And the whole piece, it's I don't know, maybe 30 minutes. It's a number of sort of shorter movements, and it's describing what's happening to you in very, very slow motion after you got hit in the head and you're falling to the floor, and the music is kind of coming at you, and it's brassy, and then it's quiet as you're reflecting, and it's a really interesting sort of self-reflective piece. So yeah, very inspired by that one and those other works I mentioned. But also, as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of dance works that I saw in Toronto over the last maybe 3 or 4 years that have used the narration. I don't know, I work to some degree, with dancers and in the world of dance, and I've seen a number of things with voiceover. I'm not sure if it's a really common in modern dance to have voiceover, but there was a piece that the Netherlands Dance Theatre put on in Toronto, I think 2017 or so, called Cacti. You may have even seen images of this piece that was like maybe 50 different cacti on individual sort of panels or platforms on the floor. And there was a scene in that it was kind of a duet between these two dancers, and it was a very serious duet. And then you have this voiceover explaining in a very silly way what they're doing. It's a man and a woman dancing, and the woman kind of goes, goes for a fall and the man goes to catch her, but he misses, and the text says, you know, the voiceover is kind of in her voice, oh, you missed me there, oh, you better get me next time, you know. And it was just this kind of really interesting context where you're watching a piece and then you're hearing the piece being described as you're, you know, listening to it. And I absolutely love that. That meta, you know, kind of element that the thing is reflecting on itself. I think that's a unique way to watch a piece. I've also seen pieces where you're watching a piece and there's a built-in audience on stage that is choreographed, but they're the audience also watching the piece and you're watching them watch the piece.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to do with that, you know, with music that, you know, a lot of potential.
Wonderful. Well, we certainly look forward to hearing more of your music. And I'd like to add that in the coming season, Esprit has a new work of yours that we're going to premiere. And maybe you can just give a little promo for that.
Sure.
Title and what sort of you got in mind there. And
yes.
we're going to be able to do it with audience live, but I'm certainly planning to have electronic backup and recording.
Right, yeah.
It's about your piece.
Sure, the piece is called Action Gallery, and yeah, it's been written already. It was, you know, it was all postponed because of the pandemic, but yeah, it actually really kind of directly picks up on the ideas from Music About Music, but it does use a number of physical kind of movements and gestures that I thought would be possible, you know, without too much extra rehearsal time. That's always something to think about with a large ensemble and trying to do theatrical things is, okay, is this going to take another 4 hours of rehearsal to get them to move in this way? So kind of simple things, stomping the feet, speaking, breathing, hissing, clapping, doing different, all kind of different sounds with the instruments and not. It kind of recontextualizes the orchestra as a visual, like an art gallery, and almost you're in the audience and you're sort of walking through the gallery, and you have different soloists, could be different exhibits, and sometimes I have musicians all look at one soloist who is maybe as if they're also watching the this little individual exhibit. Sometimes the orchestra acts as one exhibit, and all kind of different things. So it again, using visual elements, extra musical elements to enhance and the music itself.
Wonderful. Well, we're looking forward to being back in the concert hall.
Yes.
And performing your work. So I invite everybody to join us. And thank you very much, Quinn, for giving us some illumination on your music.
Sure, Alex. Thank you, and Esprit as well.